Yo, what's up? It's your boy, Bronze Age Midget. So, I had an earlier podcast and I was talking about effective talking points against the far left. And that was more about arguments to make against their positions and their ideas. This one, I wanted to continue that theme, but I want to talk about more generally in terms of strategy, in terms of general marketing, how to be more effective against the far left. I have a number of points here. I'm just going to go through them. The first one is to position ourselves as the true opposition to the powers that be while offering a positive vision. And then continuing on, we are fighting against the 0.1% elite that seeks to exert increasingly intrusive forms of control into each of our lives, while creating strong, vigorous, innovative, trustful, and virtuous peoples, communities, and countries. So basically, that covers two real big things, right? Position ourselves as the people who are opposing those in power. And secondly, offering that positive, somewhat inclusive vision. And I'm huge into optics, right? I think optics are almost everything. Coca-Cola pays attention to optics. Everyone who's successful pays attention to public perception. So it's absolutely retarded to not, first of all. And there is a place for retarded people, I suppose. It's good to have them as like shock troops and whatnot, but they're not really going to accomplish much besides creating a backlash on their own. But in terms of kind of neo-right politics, we really do need to focus on this 1% elite and focusing on ways that they negatively impact broad swaths of the people. And as you'll see, I have a pretty strong background in the left, so I know a lot of the ways that they think. And I also think that we should incorporate some of their strategies and tactics as well. And one of those is position yourselves as fighting the power, right? That's the left's whole thing. They say that they're fighting for the masses, fighting for equality and fighting against, the oppressors and all this jazz. But as we'll see in reality, the reality is a whole different thing. But we need to do a better job of presenting ourselves as fighting those who are in power and abusing that power, whether that be the state or corporations. And then secondly, providing that positive vision. So, like I said with optics, if your idea of like your positive vision is an ethno state, you're gonna go nowhere. Simply put, it's at least in most. I wouldn't say most countries, but definitely in the United States, right? That's not gonna go anywhere in the United States. That's all that's gonna do is get you Waco'd. I don't know what to tell you. But you need to be able to create like coalitions of people. And you do this around kind of like big, broad visions, kind of value systems, things like that. And I go into this later where I talk about like tradcons focusing on the superficial kind of aesthetic rather than the underlying virtues of a great society. So in coming back to this case, creating a positive vision of a society based around some of those virtues rather than just simply like ethnicity or traditional conservatism, tradconism, something like that. Not something that's necessarily reactive, but does have an actual positive vision. And I'll talk about that more later. Number two, the next thing to be effective against the far left is to expose them as fake opponents of the powers that be. So I have a couple examples. So, for example, they talk about fighting capitalism, but then they support corporations using and growing their power to silence and censor people like Alex Jones, just as an example. Virtual nobodies, even sometimes presidents of sovereign states, not just Trump, but also African leaders, or anyone who really challenges the officialized global narrative. So that's one example of how the left are fake opponents of the powers that be. The next example I have is, despite calling themselves free thinkers, they are amazingly trusting of the establishment and have sheep-like views on things like the COOF. They never deviate far from the official narrative. Cryptocurrency, which they largely ignore or condemn because it doesn't fit within their schema of the world. Human rights and liberal notions of equality, which Western leftists essentially uphold Western liberal ideas that they were taught as children to an extreme, and they condemn the West for not living up to those ideals. On the other hand, Chinese communists, for example, they say that human rights are a Western cultural invention. They reject it outright. So, Western leftists, despite positioning themselves as rebels, they're really just over-socialized, as Uncle Ted would say. Next, and they also have a very, the fifth grade history class view of World War II, right? Allies good, Axis bad. So there's that as well. They don't deviate a lot whenever it suits them. So just exposing the left as the fake opponents, right? There's so many instances where the left will choose social issues over economic ones, or they'll play this kind of oppression Olympics thing where they'll be like, oh, black women, handicap, lesbian. It's tiresome, really. But they never actually get around to opposing people who are at the very, very, very top, except for maybe doing a Facebook post or a Twitter post or a TikTok post. Usually it's like they'll do a TikTok post, it's a screenshot of a Twitter post. It's fake and gay, right? Morality is not opinions. Morality is actions. So there's that. And of course, morality is virtue, right? Virtue is habitualized actions turned into character. And leftists don't understand that. But they also kind of have this fake morality based on opinions, whereas they'll more than happily kind of engage in the capitalist system when it's convenient for them. They're not as rebellious as they think, like I've said before. So the next one is, I'm going to get through these quick because it's late where I'm at. Next one is number 3, how to be effective. Don't be a negative character that the left paints you as. Now this sounds easy, right? Don't walk around with a fucking, swastika tattoo or a fucking t-shirt, that says fascist on it or something, a picture of Hitler, like Golden Sun. So it sounds easy. Just try to have decent optics. But at the same time, the left is, even if you aren't into ethno-nationalism, right? Even if whatever, the left will still call you a racist, right? They think Charlie Kirk is a racist. They think everybody's a racist. They think, they literally think you could probably type in Plato racist and you'd find an article about it, right? I'm getting ready to talk about traffic accidents being racist. So everything's racist to them. So it's very difficult. But at the same time, don't go out of your way to make yourself look like a racist. It's not that fucking hard. And if you do, you're an idiot, right? You're retarded. You have you're not helping the movement, quite honestly. You're just like a person. You're might as well be a bot. Oh, I'm going to comment N. It's like so low IQ bullshit that it, again, it doesn't help a lot. It doesn't help anything at all. Again, it just makes everything look bad. It's kind of poisoning the well. So don't be that negative character. don't promote obviously QAnon and like just rattle on about Pizzagate conspiracies. Don't necessarily. I mean, like race realism doesn't necessarily need to be foundational or anything like that. But it also goes a little bit deeper than that, right? Like you don't want to look like a negative stereotype of something. So don't look like a negative stereotype of like quote unquote a conservative or a negative stereotype. I guess if you're a bald white guy, you can't exactly avoid that negative stereotype. But nonetheless, don't look like a fucking lame yokel, and don't look like a conservative. Those are like the two things, right? You got the yokels who are like, I don't know. I mean, they're pretty broad spectrum themselves, but the conservatives kind of dress like the people you'd meet standing in the line of a fucking bank or at a country club, right? It's not exactly the most comfortable room of people if you don't fit within that mold necessarily. And they're just kind of lame, right? Like, it's just not a fun circle to be in. What are you going to do with conservatives? They don't sound like fun people to have drinks with, quite honestly. What do you really want to get a drink with these people? Like, honestly, you really want to hang out with somebody like Ben Shapiro? Nobody does. But even Trump, right? He kind of broke this mold. He would normally wear these kind of ugly fucking polos or business jackets, but he busts out this fucking ugly red MAGA cap, this trucker cap, and made it an icon because it was such a stark contrast to what his actual class was. He's a real estate developer. And it kind of reached down to his constituency. So that was a good example of breaking the mold, not being necessarily the negative stereotype of looking like a real estate developer, and creating kind of like an iconic part of a campaign and culture around political leadership. So again, the success of any political movement, whether it's left or right, it depends on mobilizing people from different parts of society, often of different class and ethnic backgrounds. So this is just the reality, right? You're not going to get around this if you want change in society. You're going to have to build coalitions, and you don't get to pick who is in the country right now, who you have to you have to pick what you're going to build your coalition around. You don't get to choose the social territory that you're in. You can only adapt to it. And how do you adapt a political program that is both, let's say, based and fucking viable, not predicated on, you're prepping for the collapse or some bullshit like that. And if you don't think there is a solution, right? I just put out another podcast, what was it? Thrive amidst the decline. Put out a blog article too, a really good one. I spruced it up. So in any case, number 4, how to be effective against the left is to be hard to pin down. Avoid pigeonholing yourself, right? Don't be willing to kind of like shift around a little bit in your positions just to see, and be hard for them to say, it's hard to explain. Like I'm very Socratic with the way that I debate, right? I ask a lot of questions, and I will be very flexible in the positions I take, but I also avoid talking about abstract ideas too much, because that makes it kind of not only I guess autistic, I suppose, but it becomes too easy, like for somebody to like pin you down in this weird like logical or moral proposition, and then you have to somehow defend it against everything else they're saying. So it's much easier to go straight to the concrete, is what I'm saying. But make yourself seem like the reasonable and common sense one who's talking about real world, and then they're talking about all these extreme things. and make yours as practical as possible whenever you're talking with somebody on the left. Um, and then they're just kind of spin their wheels with all their fantasies, and it's going to frustrate them for sure. But you're going to come out looking like the smart one, I suppose. So constantly question their assumptions. The left always makes assumptions about people, and they always make assumptions about the consequences of everything. So it's like, you said this, and that means you're a racist. And the consequence of this is that more black people will get killed or something. They'll go on these crazy like logical leaps. But if you can catch them in it, it's really interesting, really hilarious, and they'll kind of get stuck a little bit, or they'll have to like defend that, right? So the next one is number 5, how to be more effective. Is there are some trends we need to avoid, right? We need to jettison some of this shit. The first one is libertarianism, right? And unfortunately, John McAfee, the last real libertarian, just died. So I rest in peace to him. And I have inside information about what really happened to him. So check out the NewsHour podcast about that. Anyways, so we need to jettison kind of like this normie bullshit, weird, autistic libertarianism, simply for the fact that it's not realistic in 2021, right? Libertarianism is not a possibility anymore. It's just not. Because countries that do have strong states, kind of a strong collective will basically prey upon countries that don't. The countries that can dominate others will. And the countries that can dominate others will be the countries that have a national vision, a kind of slight national plan. I'm not saying a top-down economy or a command economy, but the fact of the matter is that states intervene in their economies all the time, and for a good reason. It's because they want to position themselves. Well, it's either because they're being controlled by another state, or it's because they want to position themselves favorable in regards to other states. So that's just the reality of it. But we need a strong state that can, again, both. I guess let me back up. So there's just the fact that strong states will prey on those that are weak, and then secondly, we need a state that can be used against the large conglomerate capital, the big tech companies, the people who are the globo homo, right? We need a state that isn't down with that. A state for the people, not down for the Bezoses and the Soroses and the Zucker faces and things like that. So, okay. So we're gonna have some sort of power, right? With the libertarianism thing, they think that the state is the worst thing. But the thing is, we're gonna have some sort of power, and it's either gonna be a state power, state corporate mix, or it's just gonna be more corporations. It's gonna be mostly corporations, and they're just gonna run everything. And the states are just kind of like an appendage of that. And that's kind of what the United States is, and to some extent, right? You have the state, the deep state, and this very elite conglomerate capital with tentacles throughout the economy and the financial system. A lot of this is kind of just banking capital as well, hedge funds. But in a lot of ways, the existing state isn't as powerful as those economic forces. So you do need it. And if these economic forces are subversive, right, it's not like Twitter or Disney in a lot of regards is a good thing for society, nor has been for a long time. So you need a state that can kind of direct society a little bit more. Another one is like the return meme. We need to get rid of that, because again, it shifts focus away from the essence and onto the superficial. It's like this kind of like mythical view of the past, these very limited societies, without, again, like prioritizing and valorizing the actual virtues likewise, technology isn't going to go back in the box, right? We're not going back to 1950 before we all had phones and, massive technology all around us. This is not going to happen. Same thing with the libertarians, right? Strong state overcomes the weak state. High technology society overcomes the low technology society. So again, that's not an option, right? We have to adapt to the fact that there's going to be a high technology, complex society, whether we like it or not. And we need to figure out a positive vision that incorporates that into it. So it's better to have a sort of futurism rather than tradconism. That's just a thought. I know that's going to be kind of controversial. But the sixth one is that the sixth thing to become more effective against the left is we need to embrace a couple other trends. Populism is an obvious one. We are with the common people against the deranged agenda of both the left and big money. That one's simple, right? Like I already said, we're against the elite. Obviously, we're for the common people. We got to make that a little bit inclusive, right? Some of this stuff gets crazy, and it's just not useful, right? It doesn't matter what your view of World War II is. So we gotta make it so it's useful, right? It's gonna work in terms of public discourse. We need to have levels of discourse, first of all. That's a whole different conversation. But we need to have a degree of populism, and we need to have a program that can speak to the common person, right? Not the weird rightoid autist on 4chan. But again, against the obvious deranged agenda of the left and the big money global homo state. Probably want to phrase that a little bit better, though. Another trend that needs to be embraced is virtue nationalism. Again, identifying and codifying ideologies around the virtues that make societies great, such as beauty, strength, courage, mastery, innovation, honor, etc. The last one we need to embrace is rightist socialism. And again, getting away from libertarianism, we need to embrace the notion of a big government that can rein in the overarching power of parasitic financial elites and culturally subversive big tech, and to develop a social and civic environment that cultivates people and societies of greatness. So again, having that state that does help society flourish while getting rid of the subversive oligarchs, essentially. And if you're kind of on a higher level, I would also say another trend that needs to be embraced is reading a little bit of Marxism, right? Read Gramsci, read Lenin, kind of understand a little bit more about it, because some of it is applicable to what we're doing. But that's a different conversation as well. So yeah, those are the things that we can do to be more effective against the far left, right? These are things we need to do if we want to be effective, right? It's not enough to be on Discord making dumb fucking just stupid chats that go nowhere, right? That doesn't build towards much. So this is more like general strategies. I'm going to also make another podcast that deals more with resisting the global homo, and that will be a little bit more practical, right? But this is more general strategy in terms of public perception, how to position ourselves, what general positions to take so that we can be more palatable and effective when dealing with the far left in a social context where there is a neutral audience, right? We're trying to win over the middle ground, isolate this weird leftoid menace, and also, eventually start eating away at the power of the oligarchs, and throw them in volcanoes or whatever we got to do at the very end, right? We'll have a big celebration. In any case, I'm going to cut this out right here. So if you like this, be sure to leave a comment and subscribe, I guess. It'd be cool if you would subscribe. This does help me, right? Like, I don't really know what you guys like in these podcasts. I try to make it very interesting. But leave a comment, tell me what you do like, and I will talk with you next time. Peace.